Comic books have some unspoken rules that the publishers and the editors will sometimes keep, and these rules are designed to protect the character because there are some actions, some things that if you cross them, it's very hard to come back. It's very hard to then put the genie back in the bottle. What are those rules? Why do they have them? And you know, is it worth kind of dismantling some of those? Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Generally speaking, there's kind of an invisible framework that exists within comics, sometimes not so invisible, but basically where there are rules or there are guidelines for a character that the editors, the publishers keep very closely protected. And they do this because if this ever broke down, if the character was allowed to do things, some things, it would wreck the character for the future. And an example of this, the most common, easiest one, is not letting most heroes kill, like having Superman kill a villain. And generally speaking, it creates a bit of a quandary because if you're a writer and Superman's taking on, eviler and eviler villains who are set on, killing everyone, it sets up that moral dilemma of, would you travel back in time to kill Hitler as a baby before things got out of hand with Hitler. And we've seen comic books that do exactly that. There was an episode or an issue of Fantastic Four, I believe, that exactly addressed this question. And it's one that comes up in comics in various forms of the idea of, hey, if old Brainiac is imprisoning people, enslaving people, killing people, causing massive destruction, why doesn't Superman just kill him? Because at some point, aren't the blood of millions of people's hands on Superman for not, going there? And the line that always existed within comics for a long time was, the heroes can't stoop to that level. They can't stoop to the villain's level because if they did, then, just suddenly a lot of stories collapse. Next time Superman's fighting a big villain, why go through any kind of moral wrestling about this, what to do with this character? Just kill him immediately. Superman's powerful enough, he could do it. And it creates a certain suspension of disbelief. It's an escapism factor where, logically, superheroes who have this ability probably should, not, send villains to the raft where they invariably escape and everything else. They should kill them off because they, time and time again, Doc Ock, Green Goblin, these characters will just kind of keep back, keep coming back and keep just randomly murdering people. And Carnage is a great example. Why are we sending Carnage to jail at this point? Does that make any sense whatsoever? Of course not. But in the world of superheroes, it's good that, you can have those kind of moral questions that we get to kind of dodge them a little bit because it's important to keep the heroes. But as time has gone by, I think that's a classic example that a lot of characters live within. But as time has gone by, we've seen various writers kind of test that theory. I mean, part of the authority was to say, hey, if these heroes have this kind of power, why wouldn't they just use it? Wouldn't that be better for the world? And then, in some cases it is, but in some cases, and this is the interesting thing that happened with the Authority book, is they were clearly wanting to set up a storyline where these characters kind of went too far or kind of got out of control, and then there's an invariable backlash. We see, some of their actions come back to haunt them. The problem is their actions really didn't come back to haunt them. I mean, it always felt so phony in a lot of cases that that there would be any kind of blowback on this kind of stuff. It's like, well, okay, I see that you're deliberately setting up the scenario, but it seems very false that this would be the outcome. Whereas, you established very successfully. I think those are Mark Millar, Warren Ellis to an extent, but I think more Millar. He did a very good job in the comic of, portraying that, maybe it's not such a bad idea for these heroes to take control because, he's good at really kind of, I think, highlighting horror. And when I say horror, I don't mean like horror of the genre. I mean like, it's like, you don't have to think about kind of child trafficking in the abstract. Millar will kind of paint it out for you. And then you're like, yeah, I mean, maybe these heroes taking ultimate control is a bit fascist, but I mean, that stuff 3 pages ago with the child trafficking was really, really terrible. So let's, I'm on board. A little fascism, sure. That's that's where you get to with a lot of this stuff. They do too good a job of setting up the threat, and then not as good a job in some cases of identifying why it's not quite that way. But other rules, other things that often come up in comics, an example of one would be Batman using a gun. It'd be very easy for Batman to use a gun, and Batman has used kind of grappling guns and other things. If you really sit and you think about it, Batman not using a gun is a bit absurd because he's using things. I mean, he's throwing around sharp knives. He's using various weapons and things that are far more deadly. But we're going to draw the line at a gun. It doesn't completely make sense, but that's okay. It kind of makes the character what they are. There's another one that I talked about recently in a video is this idea of the characters can't be any long-term relationships. That was kind of the rule with Spider-Man for a while. Is that we just don't want to do that. So these rules all have different kind of ways of protecting the character. But what's interesting is that writers come on and when they do their pitch, as soon as the rules are kind of fairly well known by the fans, the writer wants to come in and start testing those rules, testing how close they can get while still, keeping kind of the general guidelines intact. The problem is like I said, a lot of these rules are set up not just to be kind of rude censors or, be prudes with the character. The rules are set up to allow it so that when the current writer moves on, goes on to a new project, a new writer comes in, that it doesn't immediately screw the new team coming on, that they're not left with a big bag of kind of crazy that they have to try and unwind and deal with. We want writers to be able to come onto comics and kind of have their own vision for where the character should go or respond to current events or whatever. And if you break certain of these fundamental character rules, you wind up painting yourself in a corner where you take away storytelling abilities rather than add them. It's at least my theory anyway. It's one of the reasons why fans push back so hard against Bendis with the changes he made to Superman, because rather than opening new doors, it felt subtractive. It felt like writers that would follow Bendis would have less ability to tell some of the stories that they want to tell. I don't want to get into Bendis again. It feels like half the videos on YouTube immediately get into Bendis or Tom King. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm going to do some video right now where I take all the things that we always talk about. It's like, how can I stir in something to do with Tom King and depression and Bendis and too much writing, and I love Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and comics are too expensive, and how about that Twitter feed over there? And it's like, I feel like you could do one video like comic bingo, where you just check off all the things. Anyway, a lot of cases people do talk about those things over and over for a reason. It's because they keep coming up. It's not just because they're out of ideas. They're not Marvel. I mean, come on. No, sorry. At any rate, what are some of the ones you can think of? What are some of those unspoken or sometimes lightly spoken rules in comics that are just not meant to ever be broken? Because they're there to protect the character, there to protect kind of the ability to continue to tell stories and not ruin the character. What are some of those that you're aware of? And what are some that you think may be kind of, useless at this point? I think that if you're going to continue with some of the arcs of Superman and some of these other characters, then yeah, you are probably heading into a place where some of these rules don't necessarily make as much sense as they used to. But at the same time, I think there's that temptation to reflect current events. And right now in the current events in the outside, there's this logic of, hey, if you see a Nazi, you should punch him. You should take care of that. And it's very cavalier about it. And we've kind of forgotten the older lesson, the one from, at least I learned when I was a kid, of the idea of like, you don't stoop to their level. You ever heard that one before? It's nowadays it's like if you don't stoop to their level, you're as bad as they are. It's like somehow that this whole logic got turned on its head a little bit. But anyway, leave a comment below. Let me know what kind of rules exist within comics to protect characters, make sure that there's a legacy being established. Like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. But most importantly, thanks for listening.